let's open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. First on the agenda is the execution of the annual election ballot, town manager / town clerk.
So in the board's packet, you have a copy of the annual election ballot warrant. We have 4 copies that the town clerk is requesting that you sign so that she can have that posted. And
All set, no questions?
No question.
No
I'll
question.
take a motion.
Go ahead, Brett.
I move that the board vote to execute the 2024 annual town election ballot.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous action. We also have acceptance of gifts and donations through the ESS director.
So I'm gonna also handle this for ESS director. The ESS department receives regular donations from Upton resident Dorothy Becalola, basically about $100 a month. So not only do we have a motion to accept the donation, thanks, but then also so that we don't have an impact as far as the ESS being able to utilize donations, but also so that we can make sure that we process the donations in a quick manner. I have a second motion as far as authorizing through September. I would like to sort of at a subsequent meeting with the board, talk about adopting a donation policy. That Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53A, it just says any donation. So it doesn't indicate a donation above a certain threshold. So in some towns, they'll say a donation over a certain amount needs to come for the select board, and that a donation under that can be more administratively approved. So I'd like to sort of maybe present the policy for the board to consider, just so we can streamline these things. It becomes a challenge when some of these small denominations then also accumulate.
You didn't want to hold them up either.
No. And, at the same time, we want to be able to recognize people that do that.
Yes.
My previous town, we used to actually do it in groups so that once they hit $500, then it was sort of like a thank you and all this stuff. And then 4 months later, they were back in. Thank you very much. This is so generous of it was so.
And we can do that.
Yes.
And which one would you like to make a motion to? Second.
Sorry, do both of them.
You want to do both?
Yeah, but just in 2 separate motions.
Okay. I'll take the motion on the first.
Okay, I move that the select board vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53A, to accept the donation Upton resident Dorothy Vecchiola to the Department of Elder and Social Services for the Senior Center in the amount of $100.
I second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous action. And then the second motion.
And I move that the select board vote to authorize the town manager to approve subsequent regular donations of $100 or less to the EFS Department Senior Center through September 2024, or until the board approves policy for the acceptance of gifts, whichever comes first.
I second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous action. We have item 3 is the town manager's report.
Of course, right now, we're really busy finalizing things for town meeting, finalizing not only the warrant, but also motions and working with finance committee co-chairs on the finance committee report, which includes not only recommendations from the finance committee on town meeting articles, but also budgetary items. So the finance committee report is finalized, and I got thumbs up as far as being able to go ahead and load things. So we'll be getting that on the website. Just want to also remind people that there's a little over one more week left for applications for the Town of Upton Annual Scholarship. That information is on the town's website. Visit uptonma.gov for additional information. Starting on Saturday, we have the Mendon Upton Community Cleanup. That also is information. We have the town's website where people can more information about participating. They can identify roads as far as volunteers, so we can keep track of things. Also, for anyone that's physically here, Town Hall has a display with QR code as well as bags, so people can pick up bags and then sign up for routes. This is going through from April 20th through the first weekend of May. So thanks to Lynn Haggerty for again organizing and getting everything set up, and thanks in advance to any participants since this effort really helps keep our streets clean. Next week we have the expression of interest is due for Holy Angels. Responses are due the 25th. The idea would be that meeting in May would be able to provide the board with a summary as far as what we've gotten in, and then set up a schedule for maybe interviewing some of the respondents to meet with the select board as well as EDC to sort of just talk about things and talk about like maybe what is in the town's interest and what next steps would be for that. The Affordable Housing Trust, the RFP for the redevelopment of 28 Hartford Ave North has been published. The deadline is May 30th. We have it loaded on the website. You do have to sign up to view the RFP, and we've already received a number of signups. So not that signups is an indication of getting something, but it's nice to at least see, and Michael and I will be making more of a push to get more eyeballs on
interest.
Exactly. The Upton Apartments 40B, I received from Mike Antonellis, the Director of Land Use Inspection Services, who's assisting the ZBA administer this application. They received a request for continuance from the applicant. The continued date will be the May 15th meeting. My understanding is the ZBA is still going to be meeting tomorrow because they have to vote to continue. Reason for the continuance is that town's consultants need additional time to review the revised site plans and architectural plans. About a month and a half ago, we had met and gone over those revised plans. There was additional details specifically around the drainage plans that also they were taking some additional time to look at and change. So our consultants who assist the ZBA need additional time to report back to the ZBA. So look for that continues tomorrow night. And then last thing, just want to let people know there's essentially 4 projects that are going to be happening within Upton from Massachusetts Department of Transportation. I think the Hartford Ave intersection with Main Street, as well as Hartford Ave North, Hopkinton Road, High Street. That project is still, as we heard from Lynn Haggerty's last meeting, they still have some punch list items. It's expected that in the next couple of months, those will be resolved. Hopefully the ones dealing with ADA are not too complex. But we also have 4 other projects that are all along 140 that is associated with the town and MassDOT, Mass Department of Transportation specifically. So we all know the TIP project, which includes the roundabout here outside of Town Hall. That project starts at Williams, goes essentially to Millhouse, stops, picks up at the other side of the shopping plaza and the post office, and then comes all the way to Elm Street, just past the community center. So that's the main project that people have been talking about.
Does that go all the way, how far up?
To Elm, just beyond the VFW. So that project, Dennis has reached out to the state. They think that around the July, August timeframe, they may have a 75% design hearing. That likely will slide, but at least we're looking summertime for having the next round of public hearings on that. Also tied to this are then the MassWorks project, which is extending the sewer. So basically from the community center to the top of the hill on Milford at Governor's Landing. So that's something we're going to be getting ready to go out to bid in the next 30 to 45 days. That also involves coordination with MassDOT, as well as 2 other projects, the Route 140 culvert replacement on Milford Street. At the intersection of Milford and Prospect, there's a small stream just past Gasco if you're heading eastward on 140. That's a culvert that the state has for slated for replacement. Timing of that would be after we're in the ground for our MassWorks project and after a larger repaving effort. This larger repaving effort, which is a 140 resurfacing project, is for the 4th project. That is going to be, it's going to run from the Upton-Hopedale line coming westward until approximately Elm Street. It's then going to pick up on the other side of Williams and bring you from Williams to the Graftontown line. And then from Graftontown line, it's going to go all the way to the railroad tracks and the new Grafton Library. That project itself is slated for advertisement in the next month or 2, with potential commencement of construction in the fall, and then proceeding, weather permitting, through into 2025. So there's a lot that is going on, and I'll work with town staff to try to have more of a resource landing page so that we can have some of this information as it's available. This resurfacing project, there's no plans that are available because it basically is in place, mill, and then pave project. So this not like the plans, but we can identify some sort of map just to identify the areas. So with all these things going on, the overlapping, I have talked with staff as far as having like more of a landing page to keep people up to date on these projects and try to separate them out as well.
When will we be doing the Grove Street Bridge?
Grove Street looks like, and we do have Mr. Westgate on the call. That I believe Dennis had mentioned it was going to be in the fall that would be available to go out. We still have to go through that Army Corps permitting, which is really what's the cost for the delay for that.
Thank you. Any questions?
No.
One quick question, and I know you're all over this because you mentioned, I just didn't hear it, or I want to make sure I heard it right. The culvert replacement is going to happen before we do the paving, presumably? Or are they proposing that they're going to come in after and cut up our brand new culvert?
And so
Is that not
that's
figured out
where
yet?
the timing is one of those things that when I had that call with MassDOT,
Yeah.
the project manager agreed we need to have another coordination meeting because the timing has moved, and the board may recall, Dennis and I, when we were talking to the board about different projects, this culvert actually caught us by surprise. We didn't hear anything about it.
Yeah,
And then all of a sudden during a meeting on your Mass Works, they said, oh, and there's a culvert. So,
yeah,
there's some of those coordination things that we
Yeah.
really need to get through because
Yeah.
essentially what MassDOT is saying, they're gonna pave, then a couple of years later, they're gonna, or a year later, they're gonna then do this,
yeah,
this culvert, which is then gonna be saw cutting the road and going down.
Yeah.
Putting things in and,
Yeah.
and the timing of our MassWorks project will be pretty important as well. Because
exactly.
we're coming in, we're gonna have to be underneath the culvert.
Yeah.
And there may be an opportunity to sort of work together on some of these things. So.
Yeah.
The good thing is outside of the resurfacing, we're a good couple of years out for a lot of these items.
Yeah.
But the decisions on resurfacing are definitely gonna have an impact, on their project. They already told us, well, we'll just not resurface the area of your MassWorks.
Yeah.
Because why come in like a year later?
Right.
We actually may end up being in the roadway at the exact same time.
Yeah.
And these types of resurfacing projects, they usually complete within a construction season. Those sort of quick mill and then come back a couple of weeks later with a.
So the
Large
MassWorks
paving.
that puts so the culvert, the MassWorks to do the sewer goes over the culvert. It goes under the culvert.
Yes.
Okay, so that's gonna be, so we're gonna be digging up that culvert to go underneath it regardless.
Potentially. It will need to happen, but
Yeah.
it may be an opportunity to work with the state.
Yeah,
And that's where some of the sequencing,
yeah.
we may be able to just.
Yeah,
sort of
no, that's fine.
look
It's great to identify it now before shovels are in the ground and
Yeah.
people are doing work. So this is a great time to have this planning conversation.
Yes.
I do have a question, Joe. When you talk about a landing page, is that gonna give our residents a heads up, like, hey, they might be paving from, the community center towards Milford, so if you're heading that direction on these potential dates?
Potentially it may be because
Extra time?
if what I'm envisioning is something that then would also have like more of a news and announcement.
Right.
So then the news and announcement is able to go, so as provided people sign up for alerts. So on with our website, you can sign up to be notified of agendas, news items, news releases. So you can sign up to then be notified, just like, when there's an agenda posted for the select board. Be notified if there's an update for paving project to then be aware of that. Any sort of larger items, and that's where the coordination really comes into play because getting an understanding, is this work that's being done by the state at night? What are the hours if it is during the day? We'll have to be working with our public safety officials in order to make sure that we have an understanding as far as that construction schedule, the details, and if there is any need for any sort of detours, make sure that we're able to communicate that.
And the timing of that is far out, like. it's
Oh,
not-
definitely. I
yeah.
mean, it's not something, but if we're gonna
Yeah.
have a landing page, I think it helps people to know that, hey, if I'm heading towards Milford, towards a doctor's appointment, I might want to give myself 15 minutes extra because we could be down to one lane or a detour. Or go around, go a different direction.
Great.
Yeah, that was more my thought.
Excellent.
I'm good.
Good. Thank you, Joe. Next, we'll open it up for public comment. Any public comment?
I'll make a comment. Joe,
Go ahead.
Yes, I'm Elisa Burnett and I live on Mendon Street and we're working with a number of residents on Mendon Street and Chestnut Street to address the speeding, the truck traffic that's increasing, and also the litter problem. We have big littering and dumping problem on Mendon Street and Chestnut Street. So listening to all the wonderful projects we have on Route 140, what has happened is Mendon Street has become the new 140. And I only see that increasing with the work. the high-speed trucks. We live in an area that's 35 miles per hour. And we routinely see 50 mile per hour, 60 mile per hour. So, we're talking with, Mr. Westgate, thank you, and with Chief Bradley to kind of look at solutions to this problem. And I know it's not just Mendon and Chestnut Street, but kind of looking for solutions, more signage, more patrolling, more neighborhood watches, that thing. And Joe's been wonderful, of course, helping us kind of formulate what we might want to do, including perhaps some votes in the town to look at littering laws and what we can do to enforce that. Because it is becoming a bigger and bigger problem. So thank you for letting me comment. Thank you for the encouragement, Joe.
Thank you for taking on something.
Anything we can do to help?
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
You're in very good hands with the people you're working with, but obviously we're supportive and keenly aware of the speeding problems that exist in lots of places, particularly on Mendon Road. I drive it often and I know it's a bus route and all that, and I drive by a lot, and Chestnut as well. And I see the trash, and sometimes it's not just litter trash, it's like dryers and other things, because there's no houses in that section, just past the few houses. So it's good. The more eyes that are on it and the more we're doing to try to address it, the better. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So,
Oh,
oh. Early 13. My question is, and I have several questions. So, Main Street, should I bring them up now? And get you ready for the discussion, or can I hold them off to the discussion?
I would think we would hold them off for the discussion. Thank you.
I want to make sure I don't do the window.
All right, we have a hearing for the laying out of Azalea Lane. The Upton Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on April 16, 2024 at 7:30.
We can maybe take some select board business out of order.
That then. The other one, the execution of order taking for 41 Milford Street, that's. How about the contract for the execution of fire station HVAC controls upgrade contract?
Sure. So let me just get to that. And so in the board's packet, I had provided a copy of the bid response or the quote response for upgrading HVAC control system for the fire EMS. What I did is you all have a hard copy of the full packet. That would be the version that's signed. The board may be familiar with our standard short form that KP prepares. So the only items really in that are the name of the contractor, the dollar amount, and a completion date, looking at getting things done by July 1st. Quick turnaround, but this isn't really a complicated project. And the project really entails what is here in the packet as far as the pieces of equipment that are going to be installed, updating the town's, outside the fire department's HVAC controls. One of the reasons why we're not only making the changes is because the HVAC system and the controls are 20 years old, but also we were dealing with a proprietary Honeywell control system. We're moving to more of a open system that will be interoperable with our interface with the community center. So we're standardizing on a web interface that then our DPW/facilities director will be able to utilize the same web portal to go in and observe and make any corrections or see what's going on rather than logging on to a third system. At some point, we'd probably be making the same changes to other facilities such as town hall when that time comes, because again, it will be easier to be on something that then can be maintained rather than having proprietary control systems. So.
Questions? No questions.
Just a quick question. I don't want to make any assumptions, so I'll ask the question. The challenge is with the HVAC equipment that we've been having at the community center
Yes.
are wholly unrelated to software and the
Correct.
controls themselves, right? So I don't want to just invest more of the town's money into it. It's just totally unrelated. I just want to make sure.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm good.
Comment to the chair.
Yes.
Rick McGuire, 11 Whitney Lane. 3 years ago, when Fire Chief DeFranzio was here, he came in because the HVAC was not working in that fire, not working well. Came in, we allocated funds. He went in there, put in a new air conditioning system for that second floor. It was inadequate. And we had asked him to talk with some engineers on that and to look at that system and find out if it was designed under capacity. So I would hope that before we do this project, that we take a look at that and make certain that the cooling issue over there is not due to the fact that it's under capacity.
Do you have any
Well,
information on that?
No, when Dennis is back from vacation, we'll look into that issue. This HVAC control project was essentially spec'd out 2 years ago, as far as what was needed. So, thank you for bringing that to our attention and see if maybe it's already been addressed or whether or not there was another issue that was going on that maybe this addresses, and then I can report back to the board.
So can we hold off on doing this contract?
It's, if the board can approve it, because I think the two would be separate. Because we are trying to utilize the earmark that we got from Representative Mehrabian's office before the end of the fiscal year. But I don't know if Dennis has any knowledge or.
I do. So thank you through the chair. So the major function of this particular contract is for the controls itself. And the problem that, as the town manager stated, is that we don't have the ability to control and monitor and adjust all of the intricacies of the entire system. So that's what this is all about. What we're also discussing is, and I think what Mr. McGuire is getting at, is the BTUs of a particular unit, which can be adjusted or addressed at a later time and not have an impact on this particular contract or the controls. And I remember vaguely hearing about there was an issue when Chief DeFranzo was here about the amount of BTUs that a particular unit was putting out and its ability to cool a section of the building. So I don't have an issue looking into that, but it wouldn't have an impact on this contract. This contract is for the overall control of the entire system.
Thank you, Dennis. Questions?
No questions, Warren.
No, I just want to make certain we look at that and make certain there's not a underlying concern.
Thank you. What's that?
Yes.
I'll take a motion. Whoop.
I move that the select board vote to authorize the town manager to finalize and execute the contract with House Corp for purchase and installation of HVAC control equipment at the Upton Fire and EMS Department in the amount of $61,000.
I second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous action. And go back to the hearing on Azalea Lane.
7:29.
Oh, I gotta wait a minute.
I was gonna say, by the time you're done reading.
By the time you're done reading,
We'll be there.
7:30.
You think?
I think so.
If not, we'll just all take another long breath.
There you go.
Speak slow.
The Upton Select Board, oh, I was gonna say so. The Upton Select Board will hold a public hearing on April 16th, 2024 at 7:30 PM at Upton Town Hall, room 203, 1 Main Street, Upton, Mass, pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 82, on the proposed layout of the following as a public way. The public way known as Azalea Lane is shown on a plan entitled Layout Plan of Azalea Lane, JR Estates, Upton, Massachusetts, dated August 22nd, 2019. Prepared by Garrier and Hallman Incorporated, which plan is recorded with the Worcester District Registry of Deeds on January 10th, 2017 as Book 896 Plan 844, 8E3. Copies of the plan are on file in the office of the Town Manager, Board of Selectmen.
See that.
Comments thereon may be submitted in writing to the office of the Town Manager, Select Board, 1 Main Street, Upton, Mass. 01568, or by email to bos@uptonma.gov before noon on Friday, April 12th, 2024. Okay. Is Mr. Westgate still here?
I am. Thank you. So
Thank you.
we've had this discussion several times, more than I wish to. We've had some issues with Azalea Lane and getting it accepted as a town road over the last couple of town meetings due to a laundry list of problems. The first one being that there was some issues that was identified with the original MyLaw for some drainage easements that were not recognized and acknowledged on the plans, and that's what the very first issue was for the town meeting a couple of years ago. And then subsequently, there was some technical difficulties with the plans. I want to say I believe it was the deadlines that ended up making it so that the sponsor could not meet the deadlines to get it in line for the subsequent town meeting. So what you have before you now is all of it, with the exception of one issue. And it's not an issue that I think should hold up the board, but I think it's important that the board understand it. The easements, the drainage easements that were discussed prior, that were a problem at a previous town meeting, have been resolved but one. And one of them is an easement that belongs to a piece of property. And basically it's set up so that legally, if the property were to be refinanced or sold, the easement would be documented and subordinated. The only issue we would have is if the property was foreclosed on, we would lose rights to the easement. The chances of that happen are slim. So what town meeting does is town meeting authorizes the board to accept the town as a town way. You lay it out, you accept it as a town way. The town meeting gives the Board of Selectmen authorization to accept it. You can or cannot do that after town meeting. It's entirely at the purview of the board. We're hopeful, speaking with Kaufman and Page and the town manager, we're hopeful that, because we know that they are working diligently on correcting the subordination between the mortgage holder and the homeowner, to subordinate that easement so that it's recorded now. We're hopeful this is going to happen prior to town meeting. But if it didn't happen prior to town meeting, I would still recommend that town meeting go forward with its authorization and leave it at the discretion of the board, provided that within the time frame that Kaufman and Page will elaborate on at town meeting, that the subordination is complete, that we can accept the easement. We want to accept the road. It's in our best interest to accept the road. It comes with a great deal of drainage easements and right-of-ways that go back to our wells. In addition, there is some other backland that's going to be under the authority of the Conservation Commission as well. So it's in the best interest of the town to accept this road as a town accepted road. We just need to get through this one hurdle, and I know it's being worked on. So my opinion is that I would recommend that the board approve this article as written and accept the layout of Azalea.
Thank you, Dennis. Questions?
No questions here?
No question.
I'll take a motion.
I move that the select board vote to approve the layout of the way known as Azalea Lane as shown on a plan entitled Layout Plan of Azalea Lane, Jair Estates, Upton, Mass, dated August 22nd, 2019, prepared by Gary Aaron Hellman, Inc., which plan is recorded with the Worcester Registry of Deeds on January 10th, 2017, as Book 896, Plan 84 and 83, and to recommend acceptance at the May 2nd, 2024 annual town meeting.
I second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous action. We have an execution of order of taking for 41 Milford Street. Is there? Have to read the letter or?
No, we don't have to read the letter. Dennis has also been working with town council on this issue. At the 2023 special town meeting authorized the acquisition by gift, purchase, or eminent domain of a permanent easement for 41 Milford Street. This is owned by Hollerbrook Builders. We had conducted an appraisal of property, and the value of the easement was determined at $56,100. The purpose of this hearing is essentially to notify the property owner of this action and to have the board vote at a regularly scheduled meeting to execute the order of taking. We have Dennis, who might be able to expand upon where we are with the project and any other questions the board may have. The document itself is rather straightforward, prepared by town council that then identifies the easement area, location. Included in the board's packet is a plan showing the easement area and the damages award, which is basically what the value was for the property as deemed a fair market appraisal from town's appraising company. And then basically just voted the board to execute the order taking. I did talk to Mark Wimble this afternoon and did not contest anything. There's some details as far as the form of what the 56,100 is going to take. But in talking with town council had recommended the board execute that because we do have a clock that is tied to the town meeting vote from November as well. So.
And he's amenable to this.
Yes.
I have no questions.
And just to be clear for folks, as a reminder, correct me if I'm wrong, this easement is to allow and is part of the Mass Works project to put the sewer up from the community center to Governor's Landing. And this easement will be used for some of that sewer infrastructure to be located on the road.
Exactly. Thank you. The pump station is at a low point within that project area from extending sewer from the community center out to Governor's Landing and is required and is included in the MassWorks grant that the town received construction funds in the amount of $3.6 million.
Thank you.
Take a motion.
I move that the select board vote to execute the order of taking for 41 Milford Street as authorized by Article 3 of the November 7th, 2023 special town meeting.
I second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous action. We have a review of the select board / town manager annual report. Does anybody have any questions?
So
Joe sent it to me first. I proofread it before it went to
Um,
It's faster that way.
And I fixed a couple things you missed.
Yeah, there you go.
And then I did, from the packet, I did receive, some comments, from Lynn Haggerty saying that we should include recognition that we, completed ADA improvements that were, while the grant was received in November 2022. We didn't do that project until 2023, so I added 2 sentences in identifying that using grant proceeds, we did ADA improvements at town hall, police, fire, and at the DPW admin trailer.
Very good.
So, and then the funniest thing is how cross-eyed 5 different people can get looking at a document. Realize that for one of the bridges, the draft had trial bridge instead of trail bridge. So just caught that about an hour ago. On one final. So we are, I think we're 100% there. Okay.
You know, it's funny, Joe, because I looked at that and then I looked at it again. I was like, no, that's right, that's true. It's like if you look at the word thaw long enough, it really doesn't look right.
Any questions on the report?
I have none.
Good to me.
Very good, Joe.
Fair enough. Thank you, sir.
If not, we all tried our very best.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. This is our best work, people. I'm sorry.
Yes,
It's not
How many people does it take?
good enough.
Okay. We have the discussion on the proposed 40B at 47 Main Street. It's not
So
good.
just to give an update, in the board's, packet, let me just make sure. Michael Antonellis had sent around an email, dated Monday, April 8th, including a link for revised materials. As I said earlier, under town manager's report, town's peer consultants needed time in order to provide recommendations and actually provide feedback. I mean, very often they'll identify issues that then the applicant's engineers need to resolve. Staff is still going through and reviewing things, so I don't have a synopsis as far as additional comments from staff to give an update for the board. The board had previously reviewed changes to the site plan as well as architecture of the architectural changes. And the one thing that I haven't gotten an update yet is the extent that the drainage at at Main Street has actually changed. I know that was a focus that the applicant's engineers, in talking with the resident across the street from the access drive, as well as some comments that MassDOT District 3 has been also out there trying to identify where some water is coming through, because of engineers having a professional disagreement as far as whether something's coming from the Fort B side or coming through the roadway, and that's what's entering onto his property. So the applicant requested a continuance. I did indicate to the board that I was going to send a revised sort of intro letter, including our attachment from last summer. I unfortunately didn't finish that. I will be finishing up that first thing in the morning, so I can send that to the ZBA, including our comments as reference.
So they're meeting tomorrow.
They have to continue the hearing, so they're meeting anyways, whether or not they're taking any public comment or testimony. I plan on being there, so I'll be able to report back to the board if they are. But my experience, these types of things, they'll take some comments, but because they won't have answers to the revised plan, there may be limited amount that they can actually receive. But that would be up to the chair on how he handles his hearing.
I have no questions.
Question?
None for me.
Question.
At early 13. My first question is just more curiosity. When I went to the very first meeting, it was about 8 or 9 months ago, everyone was vehemently opposed. So it's been 8 or 9 months later. I'm just wondering, where does the town stand Because that'll impact the rest of the questions. Are we still against this thing? I mean, I heard of words like abomination.
Abomination of the
That was the
project.
building design, yes. I remember that quite clearly. So I'm just asking, are we still against this thing or have we turned the page?
Well, I'm hoping we can turn the page, and I'm hoping that Mr. Lopez, which he seems to be doing, keeps his word on what he's revising and trying to help. He is working with the neighbors, as you. And if the state approves it, the board has no say in it.
I'd like to come back to that point. But my first one is just another question. We still have all these concerns about storm clearing. Why won't the town do a hydrogeologic study? This was requested 3 months ago. Now, the zoning board quickly refused it. But why doesn't the town do it? It should have been done 45 years ago. Is that illegal?
45 years, yeah.
It should have been done when the first one was done. It should have been done again when the second one was done. We don't know how much water or where it goes. So these engineering reports are going to be very defensive around making sure it's no worse than it is. Why don't we do that study? I just encourage you to think about that, and I'll shut up for now.
Well, it would be my assumption, I guess, it's on private property. And the town has no authority on private property to do anything unless they have a okay private property. That's my understanding.
Right, we would not be able to enter onto their property to do any sort of analysis without their authorization.
Authorization.
And any authorization would also then be solely, at our cost as well, unlike the ZBA. ZBA's planning boards, when they're reviewing projects, they're able to require applicants do certain tests. Now, the applicants can always protest and appeal that something is above and beyond what is necessary. But that's for the board hearing the public hearing to basically consider and either require it or not to require it. Attending the public hearings, the ZBA doesn't see the nexus, the connection between issues that were raised as far as subsurface water characteristics in the site and what the applicant has provided for civil engineering testimony as part of their application or what's been peer reviewed. But that's where ZBA is the permit granting authority for comprehensive permits and therefore is taking guidance and recommendations from peer consultants as well as the attorney that has been assisting the ZBA. And the attorney that's helping the ZBA was funded through a grant. So it's not coming from the developer.
To the chair, just a comment, Rick McGuire, Whitney Lane. I have seen some letters from Attorney Consiglia in Milford where he was working on a 40B. And in that town, for whatever reason, that developer had to do the study, hydrological study. And then when we brought that up with the zoning board, Mr. Andrews said that a number of towns do in their bylaws have a situation where they're going into areas where there may be wetlands. The bylaws stipulate that the hydrological study should be done. Mr. Andrews said this town does not have that in their bylaws. So the comment is, and the motion should be in the future, for future posterity, if you can't do it for us, we should be having that study. And generally that would mean that the builder who's going to build that is going to do it or it's shared with the town, whatever ends up happening. But we should be considering that. There are other towns that require those tests, especially when you're dealing with wetlands. Now, will he fund that? Probably not, but.
I agree that bylaws should change. And I think it should have been done a long time ago.
Yes.
It's just like with the Grove Street bridges. You know, you want to do different projects there, well, the wetlands are all over the place. And we did get a grant for that. I don't know if there'd be a grant available. Well, we don't own the land, so. But we could do a bylaw thing.
That would really be good for the future of this town.
If I may, I know, Rick, there have been other issues that have come before the board in my short time. And our bylaws are not the best. I mean, they are older and different things have come up. We're building more dense. As we build more dense, we start to run into more issues.
Yeah.
Yes, planning is a very important committee. They create the bylaws, but any citizen can bring, am I right, Joe? A request for a bylaw for, and I do think, and a lot of these unfortunately are hindsight. As we bump into a problem and we don't realize it exists, and there are water issues throughout this town.
Yeah.
There are a multitude of water issues due to the previous building. We do need water bylaws. We need much stronger water bylaws.
We do.
Yes, I agree.
The other thing that we talked about in these meetings, talking about stormwater and stormwater management. Our builder there, Mr. Loviser, was talking about what it takes to keep the stormwater drains working properly. He himself brought up the fact that as these drains over the years evolve or age, we're in a situation where leaves begin to accumulate, debris begins to accumulate, and the capacity of those ponds, retention ponds, become less and less, so you have more and more runoff. I think we should also be talking about, when we do these developments, talking about coming up with a management plan for these stormwater retaining ponds. Maybe the builder does it. I think this builder should be asked to do it. He stressed to us in a private meeting how important it was for maintenance, cleaning the debris so that the water goes back into the ground properly. And I think it'd be appropriate for the zoning board to go in there and say, what's your plan? Mr. Loviser. It's not an imposition. He's the one that said how important it is.
That should be made part of the record at the ZBA, because he did say we will be maintaining our own drains.
Yeah,
The town can't stop, but the town can work with the place conditions. And that's why a lot of this stuff, this is why a lot of our letters and stuff were asking to be placed on public record.
I will get that up there.
yes.
I just make one last comment.
Yeah.
My question originally was, why doesn't the town do it? And the argument that it's because on private property. Okay, that's true. On the other hand, I asked him, sir, and he said he'd welcome.
You want, who what?
He would welcome.
So would he do
Is
it?
there meant money? No.
But, excuse me,
What doesn't the town do?
Mr. Loviser does not own the property.
The other, whoever the owner is, we ask them.
I don't know.
I have no idea. Have they ever
I
asked?
think we could do this, I would,
I don't-
study if we want. That's my point.
I don't think anybody's ever asked him.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
it's hearsay, but I was told that, I think everybody knows who the owner of the property is, but
yeah.
that they were denied access. It's hearsay. Okay.
Joe, if we were to ask the question, who from town would ask the question to the owners? And how would we investigate if it's potentially possible? Where would we go to find a definitive answer on this issue?
Well, I think the first thing would be trying to work with, and the town has a number of engineering consultants that it engages for various projects, many of which have multiple disciplines within their company, to first identify what would be a scope of work in order to do a hydrogeological study, and then basically approaching property owners for access onto the property. Very often, some of this information is done using existing soil test data that may be available through drainage reports, but then there may be specific ground monitoring that has to happen. And we need to refer back to knowledge that some of our consultants would have to identify what would be necessary to do that and what ultimately would be the outcome of such a study in order to then educate not only the select board, but then even the zoning board of appeals.
First of all, you have to get permission to enter the property.
That would be one of the first things, but to identify what would be needed for access, we need to talk to a consultant to find out, is it a person? Do you need a backup to get in there, a heavy piece of equipment? What is the amount of disturbance so that we can say we want access for X, Y, and Z. This is the type of equipment that you need. Access, and then if there's any sort of monitoring would be a secondary thing, because someone say, okay, you can go on there. But we may have to then, especially during rain events, and I'm only guessing because I'm not a hydrogeologic engineer, if there's any sort of monitoring over a period of time, say during rain events, making sure that we identify things so that we specifically are making an accurate request.
You got us some information.
I'll work with Dennis trying to.
Before we spend more time and money on this, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What problem are we trying to solve by having by throwing money at a hydrogeologic study? What problem are we trying to solve?
Well, I think that gives you an idea of what the amount of water is in the land, where it's coming from, where it runs to,
Okay,
where it stops, if it does stop.
okay.
Oh,
For
I
what
know there's a
purpose,
lot.
and what will we do with that information?
I don't know.
I don't know either. What do you feel like is not known that could be known, and what impact would you think that might have on the project?
Well, back to the meeting we did have. Shortly after the storm, the question came up and running.
And what?
And reported rivers running underneath and those kind of things. And he pulled out his map and he showed us 2 new tanks that they. I confirmed with him, we met with him the other day, that yes, those tanks are still going in. And my concern is, if you don't know how much water is running, where it's running, how do you know that the tanks that you have there are sufficient? And as Rick and I had expressed to Mr. Wobser, our concern really goes around the possibility of lagoons forming back, because the water doesn't drain out sufficiently, or it isn't held in retention tanks long enough. That's been the concern that's been expressed all along, and that's all we're asking. That's why the study might do us some good.
So say that again. So if we do a study, we would know more about whether the tanks are sized appropriately? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, and if there's enough of them, and they're in the right locations.
Locations. Okay.
That's
Just an additional comment for you. When Kevin of the Heritage Company was talking to the Mass Dot, he on his maps, the Mass Dot for District 3 was showing that there was a spring back there. He saw it, but on that map, it shows that there is a spring in that backyard in the vicinity of the funeral home and 51, which is the Doug Kennison's old property.
The
Now,
spring is there today.
that's what the Mass Dot map was showing. And they
Okay.
wouldn't give him a copy of that map. This was Kevin of the Heritage
But
Company.
there's no tanks there today. And there's no,
Spring. It's a spring, pushing water down the hill.
right, but that water's there today.
Yeah.
Okay. And when we put in the tanks, we're gonna try to stop some of that water. So we're trying to reduce the amount of water that's flowing through the site, or?
No, you're really trying to get to the point where you can contain it and keep it from leaving the property.
But it leaves the property today.
Yes, it does.
Control how it's used.
Say more, say more. I'm truly trying to understand. I want to make sure we're all understanding the same thing so that we can try to solve a problem if there's a problem to solve, right?
And the tanks are on. The other thing has to roadway, all the way underground things that they're going to put. Now, if they underestimate how much water is coming through there and how much, let's say gravel or the course of gravel is, or any of those things, there's a potential that the water's gonna back up. Much care if it backs up on his property. I really care if it backs up all the way to mine.
Do you have water backing up on your property today?
But behind me, I have standing water.
A lot of standing.
A lot of standing
And
water.
again, I guess the bottom line is, we just don't want this to get worse or come close for, our properties
Right,
or.
right.
No.
And I'm asking questions to be thoughtful about if we're going to spend taxpayers' money to get information.
And I know,
What is the information going to do for us? And if the information could potentially reduce the risk that there's water that flows to other properties today, that's the part I'm sort of struggling with. Like the water flows today and floods properties. It's a wet area. So it's like there's a lot of sheet flow, there's the rain, there's a potential spring. So there's a lot of water happening. It's obviously all going to get ripped up, which is going to change what the water does. And that's why all this infrastructure gets put in to try to capture it and catch it so that it absorbs, or so that we're not creating more water downstream. Doing a hydrological study, I'm not sure what the additional information from a hydrological study would tell us in terms of impacting the design for the project.
Well,
I'm personally, without knowing, skeptical that we would get any real actionable insight from a hydrological study.
when an engineer sits down and looks at that property, he's looking at the rain that's coming off of the roof, the garage, the roof of the building, blacktop, and that's what they work at.
I fully,
They work to make certain that that water is taken care of and doesn't flow on other properties. Unfortunately,
Yes.
today at 4 and 6 School Street, anytime there's rain, it gets worse now that we get 1 and 2 inches. The water floods through their backyard. In the winter at the funeral home, he had black ice every time, almost all the time, because the water is always flowing through there. Heritage has water problems. The people on Plain Street have water problems. Yeah, Mr. Lopez is in a position where in the past, things should have been done differently. They weren't, but we're trying to catch up now because this is a fix. What's going on there? Because people have flooded basements constantly. So, the study will give us an area of what's going on, but eventually some engineering is going to have to be done to say, as Pat says, are those retention ponds sufficient to capture that water? We don't know because it's never been looked at. We have more water flowing than what is coming off the roofs of the building in Blacktop. That's the point of the dangerous.
yeah, and I do think that, and I mean, if you read the paper, but like that was part of the conversation I had with the reporter, right? Like, we don't have bylaws in Upton. I'm not sure if there are state laws. It sounds like there are some towns that have some laws around these hydrological studies, right? Because I think engineers account for the rainwater, right, that comes down. That's obvious. It's measurable. Okay, we know they do the surface area. They figure out, all right, if we're going to get X number of inches of rain an hour, they take into account what they can see, right? Obviously, if there's a river, right? But there's water that flows underground. It does. I've seen it, right? And you can see where it comes out. This could be an area where that's happening. I don't know where that gets captured in our bylaws, in our local bylaws, or in any state bylaws, or in any engineering plans. But I know that there's flowing water underground in some areas. I don't know about that area, right? And if that's the case, disturbing that water, you would want to account for that. So a hydrological study would help us understand if that water's flowing today. Great. What I don't know is if the water's flowing today and we know it, and there's some outcome, putting in all this infrastructure, like we're adding infrastructure. So I don't know how adding infrastructure to gather and capture water that's flowing, whether it's from a spring or from rain or sheet flow or parking lots or reefs, is going to in some way make the problem worse. And that's the sort of logical disconnect I sort of have in my own head. I'm just being honest with you. Like, I don't know. I know we're disturbing the site. We're putting in infrastructure to try to gather and capture that water. That's what's proposed. There's no infrastructure there now. We're not going to be adding more water to the situation. We might be moving where it goes, but all this stuff is being put in place to capture it. It's not being captured at all today. So that's what I struggle with, is like you know what I mean? It's like, okay, more information, but how's it gonna, what's the practical impact gonna be? And I don't understand it myself.
How many tanks is he putting in?
Well, he's got at least 2 major detention tanks of that stuff. And then he was putting some couple of smaller tanks, just to capture and redirect the water to pumps.
He's got 3 retention ponds, and in the middle, he has a large tank, underground tank, cement block, whatever, cement building, and the water's gonna run into there. That's actually on Chris Wolf's side of the property on the downside. Now, is it adequate? We don't know.
And just a point of correction through the chair, it's not an actual tank. It's an underground storage basin. So basically picture a beehive where it's a concrete structure, but then doesn't necessarily need to be.
So it has French drains all around it?
The bottom is basically open gravel so that water can infiltrate into the ground. And that's the primary infiltration source. Any sort of outflow over that, if there's excessive water that gets in, that goes to what looks like a series of 2 detention basins. I do know that one of the issues in this revised plan were that those were elevated to provide more separation from groundwater. That was a peer review comment from the initial peer review from the town's consultant. And then there was a third detention basin that was towards the entrance of the access drive heading out to Main Street.
Swales.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I just wanted to let you know that I talked to Stantec after one of the zoning board meetings, and they do hydrogeological studies, and they're on the project, so they might be able to give you some advice. And the other thing is that when they built our neighborhood, talking to the people on School Street, they really suffered with flooding. When they built our neighborhood up above, the water opened up and flowed down. And the other issue was when they built Memorial School way back when. And I've been trying to find people who are old enough and still around to come forward.
That was as diplomatic as you could possibly have been, Marcy. Trying to thread that needle.
Tiptoeing through a minefield, you really were, you did a great job.
You're cut out for this.
I'm kidding, because I remember when the extension was put on, so.
Yeah, I talked to people who don't remember this, but I was told that when they started to dig for Memorial School, there wasn't a water problem, and then they hit water, and then it flooded like all the way down to Pleasant Street, so bad that the fire department pumped out basements. So we hear these things and we know there's water. Do you remember that?
There was an issue, I seem to recall something, even when they put the second addition of Memorial School, water was coming down and it is coming down on Pleasant Street, going down on Plain Street. There's an issue there. I don't know how big the pipe is or something that just found its way. But there's people who've been around who tell you, yeah, there's water there's been water issues on that hill, and, you know, I don't care what you say, unless you put a pump in, that's gonna run downhill, and it's gonna find a way.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And I must have been 2 years old. Thank you for.
Don't back out of it, Matt.
Can I ask a follow-up question to last month's meeting? We were talking about a letter the board was going to put. I was wondering if you progressed on the letter and what your thoughts are on the letter, and if you are supporting the project or opposed to the project or concerns about the projects, the content of the letter.
We voiced our concerns,
Right, and we're
and he's finishing it up tomorrow. And we are gonna add it to the record.
It should contain our original letter with
Yeah.
all of our original concerns and everything that we're still concerned about. Once again, it's all part of the public record, because at the end of the day, the state reviews it.
Right.
Does that create water issues for the project itself? All this water or something? Or is all the drainage and swales? and-
Diggers dig, they don't care.
No,
but that's where.
Not saying, not saying,
the machine, thanks.
yeah,
where-
That's what I think is going on.
yeah.
Joe, can I ask you a question? Maybe you know the answer, so since you're the town manager. So what is the watershed? What watershed are we in on this? A or A2, do you know? Because I know, I was told when they
Two.
built the school, there's different rules that apply to what they can and can't do in these different watershed areas.
I would have to get back to you that. I'm not quite sure, what those denote,
I would say I've never
Designation.
heard, I've never even heard of this.
yeah, if you're talking about, USGS, soil,
Yeah, it's based on, yeah, so I researched it a little bit, and it's, you know, designated as different watersheds, either zone A or zone A and E. I have a feeling we have two different watersheds on this property. And that was my question, was I was told that there's two different sets of rules if you have two different watersheds. So how are you applying, you know, which set of rules are you going?
so zone A and zone AE should be actually off of a federal firm map. So that's basically flood maps. There's, to my knowledge, there's not a watershed map outside of sub watersheds that then really are denoted as far as if we're tributary to like West River, and then that runs into the Blackstone. But when you say zone A, zone AE, that sounds like it's federal insurance rate map. So that's basically identifying flood zones, but also areas that are susceptible to flooding. They don't necessarily need to be around a stream or a river and flood that way, but that there may be conditions that pose a risk. So
I heard that was a scenario that happened when they built the extension onto the, you know, when the memorial school. That was something that they ran into problems.
Don't they have designated watershed areas? I mean, actual watershed.
they should, it's just the A and AE, those just, I hadn't come across those before except for firm maps.
Yeah, I don't know what that is that you're referring to.
Was this something that was provided as testimony from their engineer or?
I did look something up and I did see something about different, I've talked to, and again, I have a friend who used to, work for Board of Health, and he kept telling me that about the issues with the school that they had. You know, and he keeps asking me what zone are we in, A or A and E, because different rules apply as far as building different projects. And I guess that's what they ran into up at the school, and us being so close to the school, that was one of the questions.
Mr. Westgate, you still on there?
Any idea?
He's at the water department.
I wish I wasn't.
I was gonna say that's. You're a
I've
good
been
man, Charlie.
working- So
I told him to not, he didn't
It's on
listen.
vacation.
See what you
Yeah.
get for working for
Dennis.
vacation, Dennis.
Dennis.
We do
I
Appreciate
know.
it, but
So let me see if I can shed some light on this. It's a very complicated and convoluted discussion, and there's a lot of moving parts to discussing water on a particular piece of property. So I'm going to condense it down and make it as simple as I can. Basically, when engineers take a look at a piece of property and they look at the water, they look at on two levels. And Brett, you hit a lot of it really in your questions. You were touching upon a great deal of really good questions on where we should be looking at this. One is the catchment area, and the catchment area is all of the water that sheds onto the property and then off of the property. And NIPD's National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System mandates what we have to do for stormwater management, which means when an engineer figures out the water on a particular piece of property, they have to do a pre and post analysis. They have to take the condition that the property is in now, and they have to figure out how much water comes onto the property and off the property now. And then they have to demonstrate how, when they're done constructing what they're going to construct, no more water will come off that property than currently is coming off of it now. That's one thing. And they do this in several ways. They do this by putting underground recharge systems in, which is your, I think the gentleman was talking about tanks, and this is basically what they do. They put in infiltration basins designed to collect the water, remove the suspended solids, treat the water, and then put it into a system that allows it to go back into the aquifer or the ground. Here's the second part of it. The water that's under the ground is different than the water that's above the ground. This is where the hydrology study goes beyond what typically is done in a normal situation. Hydrology studies concentrate on environmental impacts, flood protection, drought mitigation. It looks at the pollutants, the environmental impact assessment, the ecosystem. It goes far beyond what a regular study would do for meeting NIPDs. So they look at, and some of this is touched upon in the engineers' reports, because to do the detention basins or retention basins and the infiltration basins, they have to do perk tests. And the perk tests give them a view of what's under the ground. It tells them where the water table is during peak seasons. It tells them how fast it can percolate the water if you put a detention basin in or a retention basin in, whether it's designed to retain the water or detain the water, how long it will take to dissipate that water through the ground system or to put it back into the aquifer. All that is considered. Hydrology, these reports generally go more into the ecosystem. They talk about the movement of sediment through the property and the impact it has on the ecosystem and species and things of that nature. It's much more involved than what is required by normal rules and regulations today. I'm not saying that it's not a good thing, because I think it is a good thing, but it takes a different look at what is typically done when you're going to construct a piece of property. You're gonna install a subdivision, or you're going to put a building up on, you're going to clear cut some land, and how the impacts are going to be. The hydrology study goes far more in depth, but on a much broader scale. It doesn't just look at
It's just water, yeah.
Yeah, it looks at a whole bunch of, it looks at the environmental impacts, the movement of sedimentation, ecological impacts. It goes way beyond all the other things. Generally speaking, if whatever they're proposing for a building there or construction there, I find it very hard to believe that they will be able to construct anything that will shed any more water than what is currently being shed. However, and I hear some of the people in the audience, and I understand the point they're getting at, and it's a valid point. So there's a situation there now that exists that's not right. And this is my concern. If the building of this complex allows that to be utilized as a benchmark for their pre and post, then the problem didn't get fixed. And that's what I'm hearing. I think that's what I'm hearing. I think that there's issues there now with perhaps there's some underground water that's making its way through there, not simply catchment areas. And if they tap into that, although it's going to be very difficult, I have to tell you, because their detention ponds and their infiltration basins all have to pass a high water perk test. So they all have to demonstrate beyond any reasonable doubt that during peak flows, they can still infiltrate into the ground the water that they're catching. It's a very tough thing. I mean, there's an awful lot riding on the engineers and what they put together on this. So, like I said, I was hoping I wasn't going to get asked, but it's a touchy situation. It's a complicated subject. There's an awful lot to it. But I understand the concerns of the residents, and I don't think they're invalid at all. I think they're valid. I would be concerned too. There's water issues there now on a piece of property that hasn't been studied, or it hasn't been built on. It hasn't been utilized. There's water issues coming off of it now. And if there's construction on it, how do we know that the water issues won't at least continue?
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. You knew I was gonna call on you, didn't you?
I was hoping you wouldn't.
That was really helpful, Dennis.
2 points for not leaving the call, Dennis. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
I
Dennis.
almost booked it upstairs. I was almost done.
Now.
Well, now.
Yeah, yeah.
You have, there is a ballot point.
So thank you very much for listening to us, Joe. We appreciate that. It's really important. It's affecting us now. It wasn't done right. I understand Mr. Lopez there saying, well, okay, I didn't create the problem, but we have a real problem up there.
And I don't think anybody disagrees with that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Oh, he hasn't signed off yet.
It's only 8:30.
I know.
Cooking with
It's
gas.
not 11 o'clock.
We get a little punchy when it gets that late.
And then the lights go on.
Yeah,
That's true.
that used to happen. It used to be at like 9 o'clock.
That's at 9 o'clock.
Like, all right, that's our cue. We better wrap this up.
I think that's it.
That is.
It's at 7:50. Yeah, we're not doing too bad. 8:23. Thank you all for coming. Sip water all over the place. I make a motion for adjourn. You're gonna second?
I do have signatures, but you can always do.
There's no
Fine.
executive session
No.
for any of this. Okay, great. I second the motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.